The question of the relation between a civilization and first things is not exactly the same as the question of the relation between politics and religion for two reasons. First of all, civilization is broader than politics. It includes things like art and science as well. Second, first things is broader than religion. It includes many kinds of philosophy too, Eastern as well as Western. But there is at least a close analogy between Lewis's question and the question of the relation between politics and religion, especially if we take these two terms broadly and mean by politics any order or regime that structures the polis or public community, and if we mean by religion anything that asks and answers the ultimate questions, the questions about ultimate reality, ultimate truth, ultimate value, and the ultimate meaning of human life. So my question is whether Lewis is right publicly as well as privately, collectively as well as individually, politically as well as philosophically, whether the state should be designed teleologically, geared to some summum bonum, whether it should have and hold to a single answer to the question of what is the first thing, or whether it should not. Most modern democratic states, it would seem, answer no, it should not. They are neutral regarding the summum bonum. They are secular, not religious. They are religiously pluralistic. They include citizens who believe in very different kinds of first things, different ultimate truths and values. And these pluralistic states take no position on the question of which of these first things is really first. It seems that our own nation was founded in the other, older way. It certainly sounds at least philosophical, if not religious, to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I know that's not the Constitution, but is it just propaganda puff? But in any case, that's 1776, not 2007. And both the national consensus today, according to the polls, and the reasoning of our current Supreme Court is closer to that of the ACLU than to the Founding Fathers. In Mere Christianity, Lewis gives us a very practical reason for the necessity of facing this question of first things. He offers us the memorable image of the human race as a fleet of ships. A good voyage, like a good life, requires knowing and obeying three things. Three parts of their sailing orders. He labels these the three parts of morality. First, how the ships should cooperate. Second, how each should stay afloat and shipshape. And third, what the mission of the whole fleet is. The first question is about social morality. The second is about individual morality, about moral character, virtues and vices. And the third is about the summum bonum, the greatest good, the end and point and purpose of human life as a whole. The answer to, why was I born? Why am I living? All three of these questions are not only important, but they are also inseparable and interdependent. The ships can't cooperate, nor can they fulfill their mission unless they are individually shipshape. And if they don't cooperate but bump into each other, each individual ship sinks and the mission fails. And if they don't know what their mission is, they ultimately fail, both individually and collectively. Now, Lewis does not immediately apply this truth to politics. In fact, he is both theologically and personally apolitical. Theologically, he pointed out that neither Christ, nor his apostles, nor the New Testament, nor the church left us a political system. And personally, Lewis wrote very little about politics, showed the typical working-class Englishman's skepticism of it, never even read the daily newspapers, and scorned everything fashionable. He liked to quote Chesterton's maxim that he who marries the spirit of the times will soon be a widower. I think this personal disinterest on Lewis's part came from three sources. First, he was an academic, which meant that he lived not merely among mediocre contemporaries, but among great ghosts, dead writers whom he felt closer to than living ones. Second, his concrete polis, the community he lived in and cared about and found his identity in the most, his extended family, so to speak, was Oxford, more than England or the world. Third, he was, for most of his life, a bachelor. A man really only starts to get interested in his community in a natural and healthy way, as distinct from an abstract and ideological way, when he has children. He then wants very much for his children the things the state supplies: law and order, public education, health care, etc., because he sees the vulnerability of his children. Though Lewis personally was largely apolitical, yet some sort of general application of his principle of first and second things to politics would seem to be necessary. How could there possibly be a total independence of the two dimensions of human life, private and public? How could there be a double standard if human nature is the foundation for both? This no double standard was the classical position of Plato and Aristotle. In the Republic, the soul and the state are perfectly parallel in structure, in good, and in evil. In structure, because the three parts or powers in the soul match the three classes in the perfectly just state. In goodness, because aristocracy in the soul, the rule of the best power, reason, matches aristocracy in the state, the rule of the best class, the philosophers. And in evil, because there are the same four possible degenerations in the soul and in the state. Thus, there is no double standard between individual and social good, between private good and public good, because both depend on the good itself, on its reality and on our knowing it and loving it and enacting it. In the famous parable of the cave, one of the things the cave symbolizes is ordinary, unenlightened, unphilosophical politics. And in this parable, the goodness of the social life of the cave dwellers, as well as the goodness of their individual lives, depends on their knowledge of the true good, symbolized by the sun. Whether that knowledge comes from their own experience as liberated philosophers, or simply from believing and obeying the rule of those philosophers, like Plato, who have come back down into the cave to write and administer republics. Thus, just as each individual person or soul or life is good if and only if rightly aligned with the good itself, which is the ultimate end, so it must be with the state. The oneness of the absolute good logically entails the oneness, or at least the matching, of the good of the individual and the good of the state. But we need to add an important caveat here. We shouldn't really have said the state, for the polis for Plato and Aristotle meant something closer to what we would call the community, the concrete local society in which individuals and families actually live, rather than what we today would call the state. Not only did it not mean the small, not only does the state today not mean the small city-state, but rather the large, impersonal, bureaucratic nation-state, but more importantly, since quality is more important than quantity, the state for Plato did not mean the specialized professional enterprise that politics means for us. For Plato, the polis includes what we would call politics, but it also includes families and culture, including both arts and sciences, and civilization. We could define a civilization as the body or visible expression of a culture, or conversely, we could define a culture as the soul of a civilization. So, when Plato says that the polis should dictate religion and education, we should not translate polis by state. Plato is not the kind of totalitarian that Marx is. In fact, he explicitly says in the Republic that the state receives all its structure and its goodness or badness from individual souls, not vice versa.